The diner was quiet that evening, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the clink of silverware against plates. A summer storm had rinsed the sidewalks an hour earlier, and the neon sign in the window flickered its red glow across rain-speckled glass. Maria slid a tray onto her shoulder with practiced ease and whispered to herself the words her mother taught her as a girl. Nunca pidas permiso para existir. Never ask permission to exist. She said it softly, like a prayer she could fold into her apron pocket and carry all night. At table 6 sat 2 men who looked like they had never waited for anything in their lives. Their suits carried the hush of expensive fabric. The taller one, with a tan the color of bottled confidence, held his menu like a contract. The other scrolled his phone between sips of bourbon, barely glancing up when Maria arrived. "Good evening," she said. "Welcome to Whitmore's. What can I start you off with?" "Steak. Medium rare," the tall one said, without looking at her. "Mashed potatoes. Seasonal veg. And bring the good cab." The other waved his glass. "Another round, sweetheart." She wrote it down, smiled, and moved on. At the server station, she found Elena balancing a tower of plates that was about to topple. "Cuidado," Maria said, steadying the tray. Elena's eyes flashed relief. "Gracias," Elena breathed. Table 3 added a last-minute order. Maria nodded. "I've got you." She didn't notice the tall man's eyes flick toward her, didn't hear his scoff. But the sound spread anyway, like a spoon tapping a glass. When Maria returned to table 6 with bread and water, the tan man leaned back in his booth. "English," he said, crisp and loud. "We're in America. Speak English." Maria's throat tightened. She smiled with that quiet smile that servers were like armor. "Of course. Is there anything else I can get you right now?" "Competent service," the other murmured into his phone. "Just loud enough." She set down the bread basket and walked away. At the coffee station, she leaned against the counter and let the hurt pass through her. She had learned this discipline the way she learned everything in this country, one breath at a time. It wasn't the first time someone treated her voice like a stain to be scrubbed out. It wouldn't be the last. But tonight, the rent was due in 3 days and her brother's school shoes had holes, and there was no room for pride if pride meant quitting. Service tightened into its late dinner rush rhythm. She glided through it, water, plates, smiles, napkins, refills, checks, while the TV over the counter played a game where the Yankees were down 2 with runners on. When the steaks went out to the suits, the tall one lifted his fork like a gavel and tapped the plate for attention. "Fork," he said. She placed one down, even though one already sat on the folded napkin. He stared at her without blinking. "Not that one," he said. "A clean one." She brought another. He sniffed it theatrically, and the booth behind him tensed, eyes flicking between TV and table, as if both were the evening's entertainment. Maria set the second fork down with the grace of someone who had already rehearsed 1,000 tiny humiliations and found endurance on the other side. "Thanks," the tall one said, the word shaped like a dare. When their check finally printed, Maria laid it in the leather folder and let a small hope slip out from her rib cage. It wasn't a large check, but a decent tip would mean she could send her mother a little extra this week. She gave them space, cleared other tables, wiped a sticky ketchup ring from a booth where a toddler with fistfuls of fries had reigned. When she returned, the men were gone. The leather folder sat centered and closed. She opened it. The receipt stared up at her, heavy as a verdict. No tip. In the space where gratitude should be, a message. Learn English. For a beat, the world stilled. The thunder outside was far away now, a low, rumbling something that might have been the sound of her own blood. She took a slow breath, then another. The word learned scalded her most. How little those men knew about what she had already learned. The midnight English classes after double shifts, the sticky notes on her mirror with verbs and irregulars, the way she had taught herself to code switch faster than a turn signal just to stay safe. Maria folded the check, tucked it beneath the clip, and slid it under the register. She told herself to move, to refill waters at booth 4, to ask table 8 if they wanted dessert. She didn't see Daniel Whitmore step in from the back hallway until his voice came, low and steady, carrying more weight than the receipt in her pocket. "What's this?" he asked. He was 58 and built like a man who had carried both grief and boxes of produce up steep stairs. His forearms were tanned and freckled from years beside the grill. There was always flour on his black shoes. He had a quiet way of talking that made rowdy Saturday crowds lean forward to hear him. "It's nothing," she said, too quickly. "I'll close them out." But Daniel was already sliding the slip of paper from the leather folder, already reading the scrawl. His jaw set, eyes narrow in a way that meant he was choosing words rather than letting them spill. "Who?" he asked. She nodded toward the door, where the suits were long gone. She wanted to protect him, from anger, from the temptation of the scene. But Daniel wasn't a man who chased people into parking lots. He was a man who understood that certain moments weren't about the offenders. They were about everyone watching to see who they were allowed to be. Daniel stepped to the center of the dining room and raised a receipt, not like a weapon, but like a mirror. "Folks," he said, "I know you came here to eat, and we're grateful, but I want you to see something." The room softened. The game on TV now a quiet background heartbeat. One of my servers, one of the hardest working human beings I know, was told tonight that her language makes her unworthy of respect. Told she doesn't deserve what the rest of us take for granted, because English isn't the only music her mouth makes. A murmur rolled through the booths. Heads turned. The couple at the end of the counter reached for each other's hands. "My grandparents came here not speaking English," Daniel continued. "They cooked, they cleaned, they raised kids who did homework at tables like these between the dinner rush and mopping the floors. If you ate tonight, someone's ancestors, maybe yours, maybe hers, built that meal with hands that learned new words while they washed dishes." He lifted the receipt one last inch. "If you can't tip because you heard a kindness spoken in a language that isn't yours, the problem isn't service. The problem is your heart." Silence held, and then applause arrived like a tide. It started with the line cook by the window, then the cashier, then the older man at booth 3, who wore a VFW cap with pins that flashed in the neon light. Strangers clapped while Maria stood in the halo of it, feeling seen in a way that hurt and healed at once. When it was over, Daniel tucked the receipt into his pocket. "We take care of each other here," he said softly. She nodded, her eyes stingy with tears. She refused to let fall on a floor she'd have to mop later. The shift ended close to midnight. Maria left through the back door into air that smelled like wet pavement and basil from the herb pots Daniel kept by the dumpsters. Her car was an old Civic that coughed in sympathy with her tractorless future, but it cranked and she drove home along Main Street past the Shutter hardware store, the church with a sign that said love is a verb, and the laundromat where she'd folded other people's clothes for 2 years until the diner hired her. In the quiet of her apartment, she kicked off her shoes and called her mother, because that's what you do when a day tries to make you small. "Hola, mi amor," her mother said, voice warm from 3,000 miles away. "Cómo estás?" "Bien." Maria lied at first, then she told the truth. Her mother listened without interruption, the way women who have had to be strong learn to listen. When Maria finished, her mother sighed. "Mija," she said, "some people throw their fear like stones and hope they hit someone, but we were made from stronger rock." "I know," Maria said, not yet believing it. "I just wanted to be invisible today." "You were not put on this earth to be invisible." When they hung up, Maria taped another flashcard on her mirror, one she wrote in careful block letters before bed. "Belonging is not granted. It's claimed." The next morning, the post about Daniel's speech found its way onto the internet. A high school kid who ate pancakes at the counter late had filmed the moment and posted with a caption that said, "My town's diner is run by a real one." What was supposed to be a small town ripple became a swell. Comments poured in. People shared stories of their grandmother's accents, of the first time they ordered groceries in English and felt both proud and terrified. Some wrote uglier things too, as they always do, but the noise couldn't drown the simple power of Daniel holding up a receipt and choosing decency. By Friday night, the diner was busier than usual. Folks came in from the next town over because they had seen the video and wanted to leave a note with their signature on the credit card line that said, "Thank you for your service and your Spanish." The tip jar beside the register filled with small folded bills. and bigger ones that made the cashier raise her eyebrows after each shift and joke that the jar was working out more than all of them combined. Daniel added a little sign to the host stand. Welcome. Bienvenidos. Come as you are. Leave kinder. Maria didn't expect the suits to return. Life rarely gives you such tidy circles. But 2 weeks later, they appeared again, as if drawn by the gravitational pull of unfinished business, and slid into a booth with the calm of sharks tracing a line in water. She said hello, put water on the table, and felt her pulse settle into its workday rhythm. We're late, the tall one said. Kitchen still open? It is, she replied. Special tonight is meatloaf with pepper gravy or blackened salmon with lemon rice. He smirked. Let's hope whoever's making it can understand salmon. Before she could answer, a woman cleared her throat from the next booth. It's pronounced salmon in Spanish too, she said, not looking up from the crossword. Weird, right? Languages share things. Kind of like people. The men shifted, then ordered, then ate. Halfway through, they flagged Maria with the impatience of man signaling for check. Please, on a life he believes is a conveyor belt built just for him. When the receipt came, the tall one glanced at the total and scribbled a number that was less than generous but more than nothing. The other reached for the pen and drew a line through it, zeroed it out and printed. Speak English on the floor beneath the tip line like he was drafting a law. A bitter fizz rose in Maria's mouth. The kind that begs for an argument loud enough to make everything shake off. She steadied her hands instead and gathered the plates. At the register, Daniel stood quietly. She slid the slip to him without comment. He read it, and something in his face both softened and sharpened at once. Do you want me to say something? He asked. Or do you? She thought of her mother's voice, of the flashcard on her mirror, of the elbow-to-elbow humanity inside this room. She thought about what dignity looked like when the world tried to draft you into a performance of anger for entertainment. I'll handle it, she said. She walked back to the booth and placed their change on the table, though none was requested. I want you to know, she said calmly, that I speak English, Spanish, and kindness. Only one of those is required to eat here, but I'm happy to serve you all three. The other man laughed, not kindly. The tall one rolled his shoulders like a boxer, deciding whether to throw the first punch. Is your boss going to help you with this one too? He asked. Always. Maria said, but I don't need help to tell you that language is not a tip lever. Service is. You don't have to love my voice. You don't even have to understand me when I talk to my co-worker about a tray. She might drop. But you do have to decide what kind of man you are when you write on that line. He smirked a little less confidently, as if the mirror had adjusted its angle. He opened his mouth and closed it. The other shifted in his seat. Anything else tonight? Maria asked. No, the tall one said. We're done here. So are we, Daniel said from behind her, voice even as a ruler. He slid a business card onto the table. This is the name of a diner 3 blocks over. They have fine pie. If you choose to eat here again, choose to tip based on service. If you can't do that, choose a different room. The men stood. The taller one held Maria's gaze a second longer than he meant to. He left without a clever line to throw over his shoulder. After they were gone, a woman at the counter offered Maria a napkin and a smile. For your flashcards, she said, if you still make them. Maria decided to write a new one when she got home. You're not a guest in your own story. Word kept traveling. Some people came to grandstand their approval or disapproval. Most came to eat and to be part of something gentle that hummed along like the diner's old ceiling fan. Daniel started a tradition on Wednesday nights. Heritage specials. One week he cooked his grandmother's meatballs with sauce that tasted like patience. The next week Lupe from the kitchen brought tamales wrapped in husks that unfolded like presents. Folks ate while Maria taught the room how to say Buen Provecho, and a little boy at table 7 declared it Buen Provecho, and then giggled for 5 minutes while his mother filmed him to send to a grandmother who had never crossed a border but could cross oceans with voice notes. Not everyone adored it. A local commenter online said the diner was going woke, which made Daniel chuckle because he had woken at 4:30 a.m. for 30 years to make biscuit dough with cold butter and strong coffee. He figured he had earned the right to be as awake as he wanted. In October, A storm blew in fast and mean. The lights went out at 6 o'clock, plunging the dining room into a cave of silhouettes. Cell phones became flashlights. Someone from the kitchen yelled, "Gas is fine." The grill glowed like a campfire. People stayed. They ate cheeseburgers by candlelight and told stories over candle wax Stubbs Daniel kept for winter-powered dips. A grandmother near the window began humming an old hymn. A teenage girl joined, her voice a harmony that filled the dark with something like church. In the bathroom, Maria found Mother with a crying toddler and a stroller that refused to collapse. "Tranquilla, tranquilla," she whispered, and the little one hiccuped and leaned into her shoulder. She carried the stroller out and clicked the latch with a trick her cousin taught her years ago. When she returned, the mother whispered, "I didn't know anyone would help," and Maria said, "We're not anyone. We're us." At the end of the night, Daniel tapped a spoon against a glass, and the room quieted. "Before you go," he said, "I want to say something. If you don't remember anything about this place, remember this. We feed more than hunger here. We feed dignity. And nobody leaves here starved for that. Not if I can help it." They clapped, not because it was performance, but because thank you sometimes sounds like hands. When the power came back in a snap of fluorescent forgiveness, Maria stood by the register tallying handwritten checks. The couple from Booth foreslipped an envelope across the counter. "For new shoes," the woman said with a wink, as if she knew something about a brother in asphalt and holes. Inside was a gift card to the shoe store on Elm, and a note that read, "Keep walking, Mija. We're right behind you." Winter settled in with its early twilights and salty slush. Maria picked up extra shifts, wore thicker socks, lured 100 new names for cold. On a Sunday morning with breath fogging in the doorway as customers shook snow from their coats, the door swung hard, and the suits walked in again. But this time they weren't alone. With them was a woman in her 70s bundled in a wool coat with a brooch like a small moon at her collar. She looked at the Christmas garland in the windows, at the pie case glowing like a lighthouse for sweet tooths, at Maria with eyes that had seen enough to tell the truth. They took a booth. Maria poured coffee without comment. The older woman smiled. "Thank you, dear," she said. "My son's been telling me about this place." Maria nodded. "Welcome." The tall man shifted, some calculation moving behind his eyes. "Mom, we can—" But the older woman lifted her hand, and the sentence sat back down. "I saw the video," the woman said, looking at Maria. "I came to see the girl with the spine." Maria laughed, startled. "I just work here." "No," the woman said. "You remind people how to stand up." They ordered pancakes and bacon, and a side of hash browns that would land on the table sizzling. Halfway through, a little boy in a puffy coat ran past with a candy cane in his mouth and tripped on an untied lace. He fell hard. The candy cane popped deep into his throat. His mother screamed. It happened fast, the way emergencies turn the air to glass. The boy's face flushed, then went pale as he couldn't pull breath. People rose and froze at the same time. Maria's body moved before thought. She was there in 2 strides, telling the room, "It's okay," while her hands found the child, while she angled him, while she delivered those sharp upward thrusts she learned in a first aid class the diner made mandatory last year. On the 4th thrust, the candy cane flew from his mouth and clattered across tile. The little boy sobbed and then laughed the kind of laugh that tells everyone they can breathe again, too. His mother folded into Maria, breath shaking. "Thank you," she whispered into Maria's shoulder, the words warm and damp. "Thank you." "Of course," Maria said, stroking the boy's hair. "You're okay. You're okay." When Maria stood, the room applauded, because sometimes applause is just the body's way of saying we survived. She looked over at the booth with the suits. The older woman was crying into a napkin, quiet tears that carried more clarity than any speech. She reached across the table and squeezed her son's hand so firmly his knuckles blanched. "Tip well," she said, "and apologize like a grown man." He didn't argue. When Maria dropped the check later, the tip line held a number that made her eyes widen, and beneath it, a note. "I was wrong. Thank you for your service. Jay." She nodded once, letting grace be enough without spectacle. When the older woman stood to leave, She took both of Maria's hands and pressed them between her own as if warming a bird. "I came to see the girl with the spine," she said again. "I found a room with one, too." Outside, snow fell unsteady, forgiving lines. Maria watched it gather on the window ledge like new pages waiting for ink. Elena elbowed her gently. "I guess you can add first responder to your resume," she teased. "Add community." Maria said, "Add family." Spring arrived the way it always does in the Northeast. Suddenly, with crocuses reckless in their optimism and patio chairs dragged out from storage, still smelling like winter, Daniel hung a banner across the front windows that read, "We speak food, English, Spanish, and respect." The Yelp page calmed down into what it always should have been. People arguing about whether the cinnamon rolls were simply large or absurdly large. A high school senior came by to interview Daniel for her civics paper and left with a recipe for meatloaf and a story about a factory worker who went back at night to clean offices because the rent didn't care about the hours on a clock. On the 1-year anniversary of the receipt, a few regulars asked Daniel if he would say something at the end of the night. He shook his head, then nodded, then shook his head again. "You say it," he told Maria. "It was your night, really. It's your voice." She thought about that first sting, the way shame had crawled up her neck, the way Daniel's voice had made a shield around her. She thought about the mother and the little girl earlier that winter, about the boy with the candy cane, and the older woman who taught her son how to apologize. She thought about the language nights and the flashcards, and every time she'd stop herself from shrinking. When the last plate clinked into the bus tub and the coffee machine exhaled its final sigh, Maria stood at the end of the counter. The room quieted not because someone asked it to, but because the room knew the difference between noise and attention. "Thank you for being here," she said. "For eating, for listening, for correcting strangers on the pronunciation of salmon when needed." The room laughed, and the laugh felt like a shared blanket. "This past year reminded me that kindness is a language you don't need to study to speak. You just decide to use it." She paused, finding the place where gratitude and invitation overlap. "Maybe you came tonight because you saw a video," she said. "Maybe you came because the meatloaf is really that good. Either way, when you leave, I'm asking you to do something that matters more than a like or a share. Look your server in the eye the next time you eat anywhere. Thank them in whatever words are yours. Tip like dignity is part of the bill. And when you hear someone try to make a person small because their voice carries a different music, be the one who says, 'Right there in that room, not here.'" She let the words sit a moment, then smiled. "Now go home. Call your mother. Learn how to say buenas noches. And if this story should travel, let it be because you carried it, not because an algorithm did." People stood slowly as if careful not to break the spell. They filed out into a spring night tender with new leaves and the promise of open windows. Daniel wiped the counter with a towel he would wash and fold and use again tomorrow. Maria turned off the neon sign. The room settled into the kind of dark that feels earned. She stepped outside into air that smelled faintly of rain and garlic. A couple walked by holding hands, one humming a tune she recognized from church, the other from a quinceanera, languages braided together on the sidewalk. The way rivers meet and become one river without forgetting the name of their source. Maria locked the door, tucked her keys into her pocket, and glanced at the reflection of the diner's window. For a second she could see her mother's eyes there, steady and proud, and the words stitched into her heart since girlhood. Nunca pidas permiso para existir. She didn't ask anymore. She existed with both hands open, and as she turned toward the street, she said, half to the night, half to whoever might be listening, "When you come to eat tomorrow, bring your appetite, bring your kindness, bring a friend who needs a seat at a table that will make room. We save you one."